Hey everybody, welcome to another one of the Saturday Samson episodes, a Samson situation, because we never know what I'm going to be talking about. Today, we're talking about trade options, trade opportunities, and I'm not going to talk about Giannis or KD, not even Trey Murphy, I don't think, because, Trey and I, not Trey Murphy, Trevon Heath, we'll be talking about those guys, I think, a lot over the next couple weeks slash months because they will be top of mind. But I do think that there are some gettable guys around the league. At least I perceive them as such, and they would be worth the Raptors taking a look at them and trying to, see how available they are. And these are players that I like. Every single one of them, I think that they each have, a tremendous amount of utility. They range from, we'll lead off with Darius Garland, who I know podcast listeners have heard me talk about many times before, and I'm always surprised that Cleveland is rumored at different times to be open to moving him. I think he's fantastic. We'll start with him, but it goes all the way down to like Corey Kispert and Goga Bitadze. There are gettable guys. There are good players out there. And so, I just got back from covering the finals in Indianapolis, and Indy is a really great example of a team. Like, they don't sign their draft picks. They haven't for a really long time. They just don't keep their draft picks on the roster. They've built their team almost exclusively through really good trades. And they're in the finals. And as of recording right now, it's 2-2. I'm recording this early because I'll be back home in Saskatchewan on Saturday. So I'll be with family. So, yeah. So anyway, and making good trades, shrewd trades, is an excellent way to discover different types of ways that you can play. It takes foresight from your front office and from your coaching staff to not only see what players are available, make good deals for them, but also seeing like how they would port into the type of basketball that you want to play. And the Raptors too, even when they won their championship, like, yes, it was built off of tremendous drafting, getting Fred undrafted, Norm pick 40 whatever, 46 maybe, I can't remember exactly, Pascal at 27, even Jakob at 9 to trade for Kawhi. Like, these drafts are an OG, these are incredible draft outcomes. But also, like, they traded Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka, and then Serge Ibaka became, extremely important to the double big lineup that they ended up playing. It also meant that they could trade Valanciunas for Gasol instead of Ibaka going out the other. Like, it shook out the right way for that team, and making trades, upgrading when it's available, even when it might seem unseen. That's a really important aspect of building a team. So the guys I want to talk about today are Darius Garland, Jonathan Kuminga, Cam Johnson, Santi Aldama, Corey Kispert, and Goga Bitadze. Now, Darius Garland, I have been a huge fan of his game. I think he's one of the best point guards in the NBA. I think he's full stop one of the 10 best passers in the world. I think his shooting talent, depending on the year, can jump into the top 10 as well. He is on the smaller side, but I think that he's a very good ball pressure defender, which fits into what the Raptors want to do. And I know there are probably, if people aren't aware, there are some concerns about like how he'll fit in the playoffs. Smaller guards always have that trouble. I do believe he has the talent to override that. And obviously, that didn't happen this past playoffs because he got injured. And he came back, and everybody was dogging him and saying how bad he was against the Pacers. But as it turned out, the injury to his big toe was so bad that he played on it, even though it needed surgery. And he's out for, I think, 4 months, 4.5 more months now. He battled through it. I don't think that's an accurate representation of who he is as a player, like at all, quite frankly. And over the past 4 seasons, you're looking at a guy who's averaging about 21 points per game, 7 assists, 1 steal. The rebounds obviously aren't going to be a very big thing. He's not going to hunt down rebounds and get after it way too much. But as far as like the efficiency goes, it's 58% true shooting, and I think he's a tremendous shooter. I think he's one of the most creative passers in the league. I think that he, along with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, that's the trio I'm thinking of here, would be an unbelievable trio of shot creation and an unbelievable trio of shot finishing. Now, I also assume Jakob Poeltl would be in the picture here. And because I do think that Darius Garland, while he is an all-star, and I think he could make all NBA as a guard, which is really tough to do, but I think there's potential for him to do it. I think that he is kind of undervalued across the NBA. And that, of course, like I said this last year after he broke his jaw and he's your jaw strength is connected to your grip strength, and like he couldn't do anything. He was sipping through a straw, and he had a terrible return in last season. And then this season he played tremendously. He was incredible. He was an all-star guard comfortably. He was on one of the best teams in the NBA and then got injured during the playoffs. Now, if you're saying, I know a lot of people do care about injury history and all that, that you don't want that, that's fine. But I do think that Darius Garland represents a tremendous talent at the point guard position. And I think he's one of the best players. If you're looking for like a guy who's not going to cost the arm, the leg, and the spleen, and you might be able to like package it around like this is one of our starters plus stuff for your all-star starter. That's kind of a package that I think could get Darius Garland, especially since Orlando got Desmond Bane. I don't think Orlando would be in the market anymore, and that was the team I think most desperately needed a Darius Garland. Maybe Houston, if they were trying to make a play at that or something. But I don't know what they end up doing with Fred or Reed. We'll see. But Darius Garland, so that 58% shooting on like 21 and 7, and so much of that usage has gone to a guy like Donovan Mitchell, right? When Darius Garland was in year 3, and he got a lot of the ball, he was averaging basically like almost 22 and 9 and he was also like, it's not hyper efficiency, but very efficient. You can just package in like 30 possessions of pick and roll ball handling for Darius Garland on your team, and that's going to net you like well above average points per possession. He's going to be able to steer in transition. He's going to be able to play off of ball. He's very diligent. His gravity is really great, and one of the best aspects of what he does as a playmaker is he playmakes to the rim for bigs. We just watched a season wherein Jakob Poeltl took more push shots than ever, not layups. We just saw Scotty Barnes, his rim attempts lowered. And while some of that was intentional in growing his game, some of that was that guys couldn't create those looks for him. Brandon Ingram, when he comes to the Raptors, we want him to be a guy who catches on the move, uses his long strides and good finishing at the rim. We want all that stuff to happen. And of the rumored to be available players, Darius Garland to me is probably like the number one guy who could facilitate all of that. And I think he's like I think he can give you pop on defense, especially ball pressure. Now, in rotation, some of that stuff is always as a smaller guard. There's going to be limitations, but Darius Garland, I think, is a tremendous, tremendous option for the Raptors to look at. I said this again. I said it after last season because the rumors were that Cleveland wasn't fully sold and that he was gettable. And then I was like, the Raptors should go after Darius Garland because I think he's incredible. And a lot of Raptors fans told me like Quickly is much better than him. And I just full out don't agree with that. Quickly is a good guard, but Darius is like so comfortably an all-star guard. I'd love for the Raptors to try and get there. Now, obviously, price comes into that, but I'm giving names and I'm describing fit. That's what I'm doing in this video. Darius Garland, I think, could be incredibly fun. He is one of the best playmakers in the world. He shoots the hell out of the basketball. He has good ball pressure defense, which is what the Raptors want. And they will have the defensive nucleus to protect him. And he has the offensive skill set to uplift guys who are defense first players. He would be unbelievable in Toronto. He would run this ship. It would be humming. He and Scotty with Brandon. Oh my God, man. Incredible. He is my number one. I'd love to see him play on this team. A second option is Jonathan Kuminga. And I know Jonathan Kuminga he's very polarized in how he's perceived around the NBA. I am pro Kuminga. I have been since I first watched him. I think that his athleticism is extremely interesting. He's an incredible athlete. I think what was it? The one year he had like 136 dunks in one year. It's incredible. Just to highlight this quick, well, we'll give you the numbers. So this past season, he averaged 15 a game with like 4.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists. I think he's a really underwhelming playmaker. That is the thing that holds him back, even more so than his jump shooting, which he's a 33% career 3-point shooter. He shot 31% this past season. He is a guy who getting to the rim, having those touches is extremely important. This past season, he got more opportunities to like be on ball and try things out. And he went from 60% true shooting, 60% true shooting, 60% true shooting in his first 3 years to under 54% true shooting. And, his free throw rate went up from the couple years before. His 3-point attempt rate went up again. And the Warriors were like, well, you're going to get a bit of a shot here. Let's see what you can do. And I think that there are limitations in Kuminga's handle. I think that there's limitations in his jumper. I think there's limitations in his passing, his playmaking. That's a lot of limitations. However, it depends on what the expected role is for him upon arrival. It depends on, as an RFA, what position he's going to be in to get paid. And it really depends on like, is this going to be one of those guys who gets that huge contract? Does it end up like Patrick Williams or something like that, right? Or is this a guy who players who have these skills or are lagging behind, let's say, they could be on just the precipice of it entering. Okay, now it's at game speed. Now we see that it is, a feature of their game. And for years it wasn't, but finally it clicks. That kind of stuff can happen. Kuminga is risky because I do think that, he doesn't have the requisite playmaking to help the Raptors with the ball in his hand. However, as a player moving off ball, I do believe that his catch and shoot 3-pointer will come around. I do believe in his defensive utility more than anything, and I believe in his offensive motion. The Raptors, for years, were a team that wasn't supposed to be able to shoot the basketball, and they didn't very well. But I'm expecting with Brandon Ingram, I'm expecting with Emmanuel Quickly, I'm expecting with Scotty in more of the catch and shoot role, and I'm expecting the bevy of like bench guards and stuff like that for them to be more compelling as a space out team. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll be elite. They might not even be good, more so middle of the road, but there will be opportunities, I think, definitely for Kuminga's motion on offense to be weaponized. That's a huge thing. There's a bunch of like unseen skills. Like Kuminga, he's put a lot of stuff on tape. It's just about the consistency at which he does it. He has tantalizing games where you see him put the ball down and beat a bunch of like 4 different types of defender off the dribble. Like that can show up and be part of his game. He's had stretches where he shot the ball like pretty well. He's had longer stretches where it's been passable, and he's had stretches where he's been like a real terror on the glass. And he's had stretches where his defense has been really strong. The thing is about combining this all together, and the Raptors recently, and actually for many years, have been the home for players to come and find their footing, to develop that consistency in under, whether it was like Dwayne Casey, Nick Nurse, or Darko Rajakovic, that they're going to find their way and they're going to have role definition. They're going to be put in easier spots. And especially with this Raptors team, like Darko really helps players be the best of themselves. Kuminga, there's an opportunity for him here. He went from shooting like well above 50% every single season in a smaller role to last year in his bigger role, 45%. That extra ask of him to create made him struggle, but it does not erase what he's good at. It doesn't erase his athleticism, and it doesn't erase the defense. And those things, they'll show up big on this Raptors squad. Now, the question, and he'll have an opportunity, presumably, to develop those other things quietly, skill coaches, different reps throughout the games, all that kind of stuff. I do. There's an upside there for Kuminga. Now the question, obviously, for a player like this is the risk of what the trade looks like, obviously, of bringing him in, and also like how much you pay him. And Kuminga, I presume, as all players do, and as is their right, probably wants to get a big fat bag. That's with Kuminga. There is, I think, a significant upside. There's a significant downside, and what the cost looks like is really what determines whether that's worth it. But, because you don't want to tie yourself to like, we gave all this for Kuminga and we paid him all this, and now we just have to wait and see for him to become like this next thing that we believe in the upside. The best case scenario is probably that the league at large is kind of like, we don't really see it. And so you get to take, a modest swing at him. And then there's less expectations, and then there's more room for role diversity, and you can be like, hey, you're not making 36 million a year. Guess what? We're going to put you in this role. You got to dominate in it. That's the pitch for Kuminga. I've long been a fan of a lot of how he plays, but there's significant drawbacks to Kuminga. Like, of course, and them's the breaks. But I do think he's interesting, and I do think he's worth looking at. And I would be shocked if the Raptors haven't had a conversation around him. So, yes, Jonathan Kuminga. Thirdly, we have Cam Johnson. Last season, Trey and I were discussing like wing players who we think can be had, and we named Cam Johnson, who eventually it turned out that he could be had, and he was kicked around as like this guy could be traded to a million different places option. This past season, we talked about DeAndre Hunter. We talked about quite a few guys who did end up getting traded, and Cam, there was a time early on in the season where I think public perception was kind of inflated. They're like, look at all the points you're getting, look at all this kind of stuff. He probably is worth so much. But I think front offices have mostly stood pat on Cam and who they think he is, which is like a starting level player, but not nowhere close to an all-star, nothing like that. And that's probably why he didn't end up getting traded from Brooklyn. Now, obviously, there's been reports around Cam Johnson and the 19th pick to move up for the Raptors' 9th pick. I can't remember who reported that. My apologies to them. But I probably wouldn't do that if I were, and there was something else in the package, but I probably wouldn't do that if I were the Raptors. But Cam Johnson is a guy who, I understand if that's the package, but you could look elsewhere. I would look more so, instead of trading draft capital for Cam Johnson, it's more of like a player. And, that might interfere with what Brooklyn really wants. But regardless, Cam Johnson, I think, is a very easy fit with these Raptors. I think that he would give them size at a position where they don't have bad size, but they certainly don't have like elite size. He would give them size. He would give them a significant level of shooting. So this past year, he's obviously averaged 19 points per game, 3.5 assists, 4 rebounds and some change, 39% from downtown on 7 attempts per game. I mean, he's a 39% shooter over his career. With Phoenix, he was a heat pump. With Brooklyn, it's basically just like 37, 39, 39. He's shot a ton of threes with all these teams. I mean, he's averages like well over 6-3, like he's averaging 6 3-point attempts per game over his career on 26 minutes per game. So he's getting them up. And he can drive the ball a little bit. I think that his passing is fine. It's passable. It's palatable. But I don't think that you want to dedicate a decent amount of the offense to him. I think what you want is for Cam Johnson to be, as with, I'm not sure if it's the case with Kuminga, but with Garland, it's to be part of that trio, right? With Cam, I don't know exactly what it would look like, but if it is that, 19 plus Cam to move up and stuff like that, then the trio presumably would, it would be a quattro or whatever that could, I don't know what the term is, but you could have like Emmanuel Quickly, I presume Cam Johnson, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Pertl. That obviously would be, and I know some people like that's for, I really like RJ, but I think if they're trading for Cam, they would place him above RJ, and that would be the starting 5. And if they are trading for Cam, just based on salary, like RJ might be going out the other, things like that. But we're talking about players that could fit. I think Cam is an extremely easy fit. I don't think he's dynamite on defense, but he definitely is he's competent. He has size at his position. I think the Raptors would probably be in a bit of trouble matching up against other backcourts, defensively. Luckily, they would have a lot of size on the inside, and having Scotty Barnes and Jakob Pertl papers over a lot of stuff. But I think that they'd be able to compete. I think their offense and the synergy of that unit would go up a lot. And it would allow, once again, for like extremely role definition. And they would have a lot of different, they would have a variable offense with a lot of different things going on. And I think Cam Johnson, for that reason, would be an interesting player. He would be a fun player to look at on these Raptors. Now, of course, cost. It's an important part of this. Like when Trey and I talked about it last summer, I think we were like, he's not one of those guys who's considered like a distressed asset or anything like that. He's not considered like an elite player at his contract, but he's a good player and he has a perfectly fine contract, and that makes him like that's just positive. And the Raptors, we'll see if they ever decide to do that. Obviously, there's been rumors about it. I'd be kind of surprised if it happened, obviously. I'm surprised at most trades, to be quite frank with you. But Cam Johnson, I think, is worth consideration and very clearly fits what the Raptors want to do. And, there's a lot of players who fit what the Raptors want to do, to be fair. And there's a guy I'll talk about next who is like, definitely makes way less money than Cam Johnson. I think provides some of the same stuff, maybe a little bit less off the dribble, but Corey Kispert. Now, I don't know. I've not been, canvassing around the DMV area, or Washington, D.C. area, trying to figure out, like, is Corey Kispert gettable? But Corey Kispert, I think, is like a really good player. Well, really good might be selling it like a little bit too high. He's a strong player. And I think he could be like one of the best sixth or seventh players in the NBA on the right team. I think he could be in a good starting lineup on the right team. And I think he's a guy who shoots the hell out of the basketball, a wide variety of different types of threes. He has significant gravity. He hits heavy motion threes. He hits catch and shoot threes, obviously. He's a guy who provides a lot, and he can do stuff off the dribble. I think the same way, like Cam Johnson has this reputation as like, he kind of was used as a hub and a ball handling hub with Brooklyn. Obviously, Dennis Schroeder for a large part of the season took a big chunk of that role and helped subsidize that. But Cam Johnson got a lot. Corey Kispert, he does a lot of stuff with the ball too. I think that there is, and like for a Raptors team that wants to be able to automatic into a lot of dribble handoffs or automatic into a lot of split action, and they set a lot of flare screens, they set a lot of off-ball screens, and they ask guys to be in constant motion. Corey Kispert does all of that. And I don't know, I think he's 26 years old now. His contract is really, really good for the next handful of years. His contract is, his extension was so cheap, man. 13 or just on like 14 million next season, 14 million the year after that, 13 million the year after that, and then a team option for 13 million the next year. That surprises me because Kispert, that's a great contract. I know he had surgery on his thumb. I expect like he'll be ready for the start of the season. That's the expectation for him. But that is a cheap contract, especially in this day and age, So like over the years, he didn't have a dynamite year shooting the ball this year. I suspect partially that thumb situation, but 35% rookie year, 42%, 38%, 36%. He gets up a lot of threes in the minutes that he does play. It's not quite as prolific as Cam Johnson, for example, but Corey Kispert, I think, is just like a dynamite shooter. And he's definitely more limited as a passer than Cam is, but also you have to keep in mind Wizards. I think Corey Kispert is a good player. I think that getting a good player on your team when he's going to make 14 million a year for the next 3 seasons, 4 seasons, the next 4 seasons. In 2028-29, he has a team option for 13 million. 13 million. That is going to be like, that's damn near be the biannual exception. And he'll be a 29-year-old movement shooter, 30-year-old movement shooter who very clearly will have worked on. I just think I want that guy and that contract on my team. I think Corey Kispert that would put you in a really strong position. And honestly, he could, whether other guys like a Grady or Jacoby leapfrog him and make him less important or whatever, like I think he'll put in enough good minutes that you could even like look at. He's 28 now with 2 great more years of contract. Like he could be a part of a bigger trade where he's like a really positive piece that another team wants to get in. Like the Corey Kispert of it all, I think he's really, and I did play, like I didn't play for Gonzaga, but I did my like, and cards on the table, like my club basketball team, we'd make trips out to Gonzaga for the tournament. I did an ID camp there and all that kind of stuff. I really like Gonzaga. I like the guys who come out of Gonzaga. But Corey, I think, is just a good player who makes hardly any money. And if the Wizards at any point in time want to part with him, I think he makes so much sense on the Raptors. The way they play offense, he would fit in like that, man. He'd be so easy. And like, especially when you think about Ochai, Ochai has, like let's say maybe Ochai is going to get paid X amount of money, and maybe like Ochai better than Corey. That wouldn't bother me at all. Ochai is going to get X amount of money. We'll see what his extension looks like, whether it's with the Raptors or otherwise. But maybe you try and do like an Ochai Corey swap or something like that. I don't really know. Maybe the Wizards would really like Ochai and what he brings, but Corey's bigger. Corey, I think, is a much more diverse shooter. Although, I mean, Ochai, what a season. What a season for him. Corey doesn't run out in transition as often as Ochai. I think he cuts about as well. He doesn't finish exactly the same way, but I think they're relatively in the same line of finishing. So I just think Corey Kispert would be a hell of a player to get on the roster. I'm Corey Kispert pilled. That's the Corey Kispert of it all. Now, this guy, I think, is a lot of people like him, and I think he would fit in tremendously well on both sides of the floor for the Raptors. Santi Aldama, I mean, he's just a very quality power forward. And that's just the long and short of it, that he's able to provide a lot. Like, yes, he shot 12% on however many he played, 32 games, 12% shooting from downtown his rookie season. But since then, he's been around like 36% from three. It isn't like a feature of his game, but it's a passable part of his game. He has really interesting, like his handle is very functional. He's a funky mover. He can get to spots on the floor. He's like pretty slick as a passer. He provides a lot. He has an almost 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, by the way, as like a bench slash fill in sometimes big, which is really good. And I think that you could see that go up immeasurably, but well, not immeasurably. You could see it go up measurably with the Raptors. I also think he would be like a really great pairing with Scotty Barnes. I think that those two would play really well together. And I think that like Santi with Jakob, I just think that there's a lot of potential for him to fit in there. Now he has the same consideration as Jonathan Kuminga, like with Cam and with Corey and with Darius. You're just talking about guys who are like, what their contract is. That's not even part of it. Like you make peace with what they get made. Maybe it's a feature, maybe it's a bug. Then you go from there. But with Santi and John, you're kind of saying like, I don't really know exactly how much you're going to get paid. That's part of the equation. Do we get stuck with a bill that we're like, damn, that's kind of hefty? You know what I mean? Because the Raptors, what I originally thought with Emmanuel Quickley, for example, I was like, that's pretty big. But then it was flat. It was a flat contract. And then I thought, well, by the time he's like 29, 30, it'll be just like a fine guard contract in the NBA. And while like it's front loaded, it doesn't matter that Quickley was, a higher paid guard this year because the Raptors weren't trying to do anything and they had to spend money. So it was like, that's a good contract. I almost wish they had made it descending, It was like, oh my God, that would have been incredible. But you never really know, like after you make a trade, what position you'll be in to negotiate with the player you brought in, because there is like their camp is like, well, you traded for us. Stuff went out the door. Fans will be pissed if you don't come back, and you literally will just be like, well, I guess we traded X and Y for half a season of, all this kind of stuff. But Santi is like, you got to keep him in RFA. You got to make that happen. Maybe it's sign and trade. I don't really know, but that's part of the equation. But simply put, I mean, Santi, he has length on defense. I think he's a smart mover defensively. He's not like, there might be a thing where he is kind of protected by like Jaren Jackson Jr. and has been protected by good bigs in the past, maybe Zach Edey a little bit or something like that. But I think Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl at least have the capabilities to do something similar. If that is the case, if he is a little bit overrated defensively, and I'm saying this like because I think Santi Aldama is a passable defender who can give you stuff, and maybe he's even worse than that. But if he is worse than that, then at least Scotty and Jakob, there's some insulation against that stuff, right? That's kind of my thought process. But I think he's a really unique player. I think that he would provide a lot of different optionality for looks offensively. I think that he could be a guy who steps into that hub role, can keep off of handoffs, can run through a bunch of that stuff, can rapidly process through a lot of the split action, handoff, delay stuff that the Raptors are running. And I think he'll shoot the basketball over the handful of years that he would be here. And I just think Santi Aldama is like he's a good player. And I don't know how much he's gonna get paid. We'll see. But I wouldn't mind if the Raptors were the team paying him. And of course, like you don't know what's going out the other side, but that's kind of the thought exercise is just saying like I would like these guys, if possible, to be on the team. It's not my job to make that happen. It's just my job to say like these guys are good. These are potential targets. And Santi Aldama, I think that there's real utility in what he would bring to the Raptors, of course. And I'm kind of surprised at the Grizzlies not being like fully gung ho to keep him around. But also maybe that speaks to him being like, "Hey, I want more. I don't get enough here. I should have X and Y as an offensive player. I should be featured this type of way." I don't really know, but if that's the case, then maybe Toronto wouldn't exactly be the place for him because there are already a lot of guys slated to have a certain percentage of the ball. And but if that isn't the case, I think he could fit in really well around a large amount of the players that are currently in Toronto. And last but not least, Goga Bitadze. I just Goga Bitadze is a good big. And it might make you feel like the Raptors just don't have enough shooting in their front court at all, because obviously Bitadze he's just not going to shoot the three very well. Like shot zero point 0.4 threes per game this past year at under 11%. The year before it was zero point 0.2 at under 15%. He's just not making threes. He's not taking threes. But I tell you this much, he will positively impact the defense. 2.4 stocks in 20 minutes per game. He was dynamite as a defender for the Magic. I think that he is a player like similar to maybe like Steven Adams, where you don't see a lot of the big flashy plays, but he's just grinding, boxing out, showing up in lanes, providing length, and you're just like, whoa, the defense is better. It looks good. What's happening here? And Goga, I mean, Wendell Carter Jr. was drafted there or not drafted, traded there to like dominate that position, to be far and away that guy. And there's been some injury stuff, there's been all that kind of stuff, but Goga has popped off with Orlando as kind of like this extremely viable defense first big who can give you some play finishing on the other end and who is perfectly capable of running through a lot of the pet actions that we see Jakob Poeltl run through as a big. And I think Goga, like, what's Goga's contract here? Let's go take a look at it. Goga's contract, yeah. So he makes 8 million next year and 7.6 the year after. This is not a lot of money. This is like not a lot of money at all. And as far as what Goga can do for the Raptors, I think it's quite clear. Like I think he's one of the best backup bigs in the NBA, I think. And I don't exactly know if the Raptors are in a position right now to trade for one of the best backup bigs in the NBA. I don't know exactly what it would take. Obviously, Orlando is trying to they just made that trade for Bane. They clearly are intent on competing this year, but they may get stuck in a spot where they pay Mo Wagner. Maybe they think Mo will have a bigger place. Maybe Mo outplays Goga at the start of who knows? But there could be potential to try and like sniff around on Goga and be like, is there room here? Maybe Wendell pops off, or maybe, Orlando, they look next year and they think like, you know what, we brought in Bane. We're looking at this team. We want Wendell to be like a bigger part. We want Mo to be a bigger part. We think they play better with Franz or Paolo. Maybe there's room. I don't know. Because Goga's minutes went up this year, and Orlando kind of disappointed relative to what people thought they would get. Maybe that team and that front office would think that their upside is elsewhere. And in that case, like the Raptors might have an opportunity to sweep in and be like, we want that guy. And he will shore up our front court, and we'll have like a really, really strong defensive front court, one that protects our guards and our wings, because that is where a lot of the offensive talent is for the Raptors. Who knows? And just quite frankly, Goga as a screener, I think he's a bone crusher. I think he's really, really competent as a handoff hub. I think he's great. I think Goga Bitadze is a very impressive player. And he's one of the best backup bigs in the league. A lot of times, the best backup big in the league is costing you like 2 times, 3 times as much as what Goga's at right now. So, Goga Bitadze, I think, is worth consideration. Let me know in the comments who you think is worth consideration. And let me know if you don't like these guys. Tell me who you like, tell me who you don't. I'm very interested to hear what you guys think, because there's however what 450 players, a pool of that many players. There's always guys. There's always a guy who's about to pop off. There's always a guy who's about to fall off. There's always a guy who's gettable and will continue being good. Like the Pistons going after Tobias Harris was not a home run, but is a good move. It moved them forward. It helped them. They accomplished things with that. It wasn't sexy, but it made it happen. Naz Reid as an undrafted free agent. Home run for the Timberwolves. Patrick Williams, strikeout for the Bulls. That's a 4th pick, undrafted player, and a former max wing. All valued differently, all looked at differently, who all provided different types of impact. The players I gave, I think each one that you can make the case why they would make sense on the Raptors. Surely, cost comes into it, of course. Some of these guys don't cost much money. They might cost a decent amount trying to get them over, but we'll see what happens. Let me know. I'm Samson Folk. Thank you so much for tuning in. And whether you got into this, or well, like, comment, subscribe. It helps the channel. It helps the videos. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day, and goodbye.